Hello, Brobs. We're back with Tried for Her Life by Mrs. E.D.E.N. Southworth. We're now at Chapter 22, Hope. One precious pearl in sorrow's cup, unmolted at the bottom lay, to shine again when all drunk up, the bitterness should pass away more. But if Sybil, in the chaos of her mind, has lost all memory of her two protégés, they had not for a moment forgotten her. Raphael, who was perfectly well aware of Sybil's situation, was breaking his heart at Blackhall. And every morning when little Crow was set up in his high chair beside Mrs. Berners' vacant place at the head of the breakfast table, he would ask piteously if Sybil Mama was coming home today, and every morning he would be answered evasively, maybe today or tomorrow, the day succeeding his promise to his wife. Mr. Berners informed Miss Tabby that he should take her to the prison to see Sybil, and requested her to get ready at once to go. And at the same time he sent a message to Joe to put the horses to the carriage and prepare to drive them. Miss Tabby, at the prospect of meeting Sybil, whom she had not seen for some months, burst into a fit of loud, hysterical sobbing and crying, and could not be comforted. Mr. Berners had patience with her and let the storm take its course, knowing that it would be followed by a calm that would best prepare the poor creature to meet her lady. When Miss Tabby was composed enough to listen to him, Mr. Berners very impressively said to her, "You must remember Mrs. Berners' mental derangement, that renders her utterly unconscious of her imprisonment and unconcerned about her future. And you must be very cautious neither to betray any emotion at the sight of her, nor to make any allusion to the murder or the trial, or to any person or event connected with either, for she has forgotten all about it." "That is a wonderful blessing indeed, and I would bite my tongue off sooner than say anything to disturb her," said Miss Tabby with a few subsiding sobs. The same admonition which he had administered to Miss Tabby was also emphatically impressed upon the mind of Joe, and the old man was even more ready and able to understand and act upon it than the old maid had been. When Raphael and Little Crow found out that Mr. Berners was going to take Miss Tabby to see Mrs. Berners, they both pleaded to go with him also, but this could not in either case be permitted. To Raphael, Mr. Berners explained the case of his wife, and sent the boy away more sorrowful, if possible, than before. To Little Crow, he gave his gold pencil and his new blank notebook from his pocket, that the child might amuse himself with drawing pictures, and he promised to take him to see Sybil Mama at some future day. It was yet early in the forenoon when the carriage from Blackhall rolled through the prison gates and drew up before the great door of the building. Miss Tabby groaned and sighed heavily as she followed Mr. Berners into the gloomy hall. They were met by one of the turnkeys, who informed Mr. Berners that Mrs. Berners and Miss Pendleton were taking the air in the walled garden behind the building. Preceded by the turnkey and followed by Miss Tabby, Lion Berners went to the hall, out at the grated back door, and through the walled backyard, and through another heavy gate into the strongly enclosed and well-shaded garden, where he found his wife and her friends sitting under the trees. This was so much better than anything Miss Tabby had expected to see, that her depressed spirits arose at once as she hurried after Mr. Berners to meet Sybil, who, with Beatrix, had arisen to receive him. Mr. Berners had scarcely time to embrace his wife and shake hands with Miss Pendleton before Miss Tabby rushed past him, caught Sybil in her arms, and forgetting all Mr. Berners' cautions and her own promises, fell to sobbing and crying over her foster child, and exclaiming, "Oh, my lamb, my baby, my darling, and is it here I find you, my darling, my baby, my lamb," etc., etc., etc. "Why, you foolish old Tabby, what are you howling for now? Haven't you got over your habit of crying for everything yet, you overgrown old infant?" asked Sybil, laughing as she extricated herself from the clinging embrace and sat down I know I'm an old fool, whimpered Miss Tabby as she wiped her eyes and leaning up against the bole of the tree. To be sure you are. Everybody knows that, but you are a dear, good old Tabby for all, and I am delighted to see you. And now aren't you going to speak to Miss Pendleton? Oh, yes, how do you do, Miss Beatrix? Inquired the old woman as she curtsied and offered her hand to Miss Pendleton. I am well and glad to see you, Miss Tabby, answered the young lady cordially. And oh, Miss Beatrix, I do pray the Lord to bless you every night and morning of my life, for surely you do deserve blessings for staying with Miss Sybil in this here awful and admonitory pressure of Miss Tabby's shoe by Mr. Berner's boot arrested her speech for an instant and then modified it. Is this here commodious and salubrious watering place, she added, with a knowing nod towards Mr. Berner's, which happily escaped Sybil's notice. Sybil had many questions to ask about Blackhall and its inmates and its surroundings, but first she asked the general question, How are all at home, Miss Tabby? Oh, all are well, my dear child, answered the old woman, as well as can be. Considering oh, there I go again, she cried, suddenly breaking off in alarm. All are well, you say, Miss Tabby? Inquired Sybil. Oh, yes, honey, all well. The servants and the cattle, and the pets, and all the other animals, and Raphael and little Cromarty. Oh, my goodness, there I go again, worse than ever. Who? Ralph Crow? Began Sybil. Ralph Crow, passing her head in perplexity to and fro across her brow. Who are they? Did I dream of them or read of them somewhere? Raff, Crow. Oh, dear me, my head is so queer. Did I read or dream? No, my dear, exclaimed Miss Tabby, hastening to retrieve her error. You did not read, nor likewise dream of any sitch. They's peacocks, honey, nothing but peacocks, as was brought to ornament the lawn, you know. Oh, yes, I know, peacocks, said Sybil with a smile, readily adopting the explanation that had been made to her. But I dreamt a strange dream about those peacocks. I dreamt, oh, I can't remember what I dreamt, she continued, contracting her brows with an expression of pain and perplexity. Never mind, my darling, what it was. Dreams are profitless subjects to employ the mind upon, said Beatrix Pendleton, taking Sybil's hand and lifting her up. Now come with me. I have something pleasanter to talk about, she added, as she drew Sybil down one of the shaded garden walks. There was one subject, among others, upon which Sybil was quite sane, her own approaching maternity. Beatrix knew this, as she led her to a distant garden seat and made her sit down upon it, while she said, Now, darling, that Miss Tabby is here, had we not better commission her to buy some flannels and lawns and laces for the wardrobe of the coming child? She can bring them when she comes next time, and you and I can amuse ourselves with making them up. Oh, yes, indeed, that will be delightful. How strange, I never thought of that before. Why, I do believe I would have let the little stranger arrive without an article to put on it, if you hadn't reminded me. And a married woman who ought to know better, and you only a girl who ought to know nothing. Well, I do declare, exclaimed Sybil, turning and staring at her companion. Never mind, darling. It is only because you have been ill, and I have been well, that you have forgotten the necessary provision. And, well, I have remembered it, said Beatrix soothingly. Well, I won't forget it again, exclaimed Sybil, starting up and running towards her husband, and followed by Miss Pendleton. Lion, she said breathlessly, how much money have you got about you? I don't know, dear. You can have it all if you wish, be it little or much, for it is all your own, Sybil, replied Lion Berners, putting his purse in her hands. Oh, no, I don't want that, but you must give Tabby so much money, as she may require, to make some purchases for me. Yes, certainly, said Mr. Berners, taking back his pocketbook. Me make purchases for you, my lamb? Blah, whatever can you want in this awful... There I go again, exclaimed Miss Tabby in dismay. You have too much curiosity, you good old soul, but here, come with me, and I will tell you what to buy for me after you have instructed me As to what I shall want, said Sybil, laughing archly, as she led the way to a rude arbor at a short distance. Now, Tabby, what I want you to buy for me is everything in the world that is needed for a brand spick and span new baby. La, Miss Sybil, whose baby? Inquired the astonished housekeeper with her mouth and eyes wide open. Tabby, don't be a goose. But, Miss Sybil, I don't know what you mean. Tabby, I'm not Miss Sybil to begin with. I'm Mrs. Berners, and have been married more than a year, and you know it, you stupid old Tabby. But Miss Sybil, or ratherwise Mrs. Berners, if I must be so ceremonious with my own nurse child, what has that to do with you been asking of me to buy? Nothing at all, answered Sybil, half provoked and half amused at the dullness of the old housekeeper. Nothing whatever, but you must go out and buy everything that is required for the wardrobe of young child. And you must find out what is necessary, for I myself haven't the slightest idea of what that is. The housekeeper looked at the lady for a moment in questioning doubt and fear, and then, as the truth slowly penetrated her mind, she broke forth suddenly with, "Oh, my good gracious, Miss Sybil, honey, you don't mean it, do you?" "Yes, I do, Tabby, and I thank heaven every day for the coming blessing," said the young wife fervently. "But, oh, Miss Sybil, in such a place as this—" "There I go again," exclaimed the housekeeper, breaking off in a panic, and then adding, "I ain't fit to come to see you. No, that I ain't. I'm always a forgetting, especially when you talk so sensible. What's the matter with you, Tabby? Are you crazy? You never thought I was going to stay here for such an event, did you? In a public resort like this, Tabby, I'm shocked at you. No, I shall be home at Blackhall to receive the little stranger," Tabby said Sybil, making the longest and most connected speech she had made since her reason had become impaired. Ah, my lord," cried the old woman on the verge of hysterics again. "Now, Tabby, don't begin to whimper. You whimper over everything, though, I know. You whimpered when I was born and when I was christened and when I was married, and now you whimper when I am going to be crowned with the crown of maternity." "Oh, you old rebel," cried Sybil, contradicting all of her sarcastic words by caressing her old friend. "No, I don't mean to, but if you knowed—" "Oh, if you knowed," exclaimed Miss Tabby, suppressing and swallowing her sobs. "Now then, let us go back to Lion. Lion will give you what money you need for the purchases, and I beg that you will make them as soon as possible and bring them to me here," said Sybil, as she arose and walked back to the spot where she had left her husband and her friend. After a little general conversation in which Sybil sometimes joined naturally and from which she also sometimes wandered off at random, Mr. Berners proposed to call in Joe to pay his respects to his mistress. Sybil sprang at the proposal, and Joe was duly summoned from his seat on the box of the carriage before the door. He came into the garden, hat in hand, and bowed gravely before his unfortunate mistress. And when she asked him many questions about that department of the domestic economy of Blackhall that fell under his own supervision, he answered all of her questions satisfactorily, without ever once falling into the unlucky blunders that had marred Miss Tabby's communications. "Your favorite mare, Diana, is in prime order, ma'am, and will be so whenever you came home again to take your rides in the valley. And your coach horses, Castor and Pollux, ma'am, couldn't be in better trim. I shall take pride in driving of you to church behind them, ma'am, the first Sunday after you come home, which we all at Blackhall hopes, as the waters of this here celebrated spring may soon restore your health and send you back to us strong and happy," said Joe, at the conclusion of a very long address. "Thanks, Joe. I know that you are very sincere and earnest in your good wishes. Many thanks. But, dear old soul, how came you to be so lame?" Joe was taken by surprise and stood aghast. He knew, of course, that his mistress was slightly insane, but he was utterly prepared for such a lapse of memory as this. He looked at his master in distress and perplexity. "Oh," answered Lion Berners for his man, "Joe was thrown from his horse and had his ankle sprained. Poor Joe! You must be very careful until it gets quite well," said Sybil compassionately. Soon after this, her visitors, master and servants, took their leave. And that shall conclude chapter 22. Goodbye, Bravs. Goodbye.